Hello everyone, I have been married to my wife, Lisa, for 8 years. We met in college and started dating in our senior year. She was everything I ever wanted: funny, smart, ambitious. We had chemistry that felt effortless, the kind of connection that made me believe we were meant to be together. We got married 2 years after graduation and built a life together. I got a stable job in finance, and she pursued her dream of working in advertising. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had a house, plans for the future, and what I thought was a solid marriage. But lately, things have been different. That IT started about 6 months ago. Nothing dramatic at first, just little changes that didn't seem like a big deal at the time. Lisa became more distant. She would spend more time on her phone, always smiling at her screen, but when I asked what she was laughing at, she would just say, "Oh, nothing, just a meme." I didn't think much of it. We all spend too much time on our phones, right? Then she started going out more. She had always been social, but now it felt excessive. She suddenly had dinner plans with old friends that she never used to mention, work meetings that lasted late into the night, and spontaneous plans she would barely give me details about. When I asked who she was with, she would shrug and say, "Just some friends, you don't know them." At first, I let it slide. She was independent, and I never wanted to be the kind of husband who controlled his wife's every move. But something felt off. The way she would rush to silence her phone when I entered the room. The way she suddenly started wearing more makeup, dressing nicer, even on nights when she claimed she was just meeting up with coworkers. The way she would laugh at messages but never tell me who she was talking to. And then came the biggest red flag: the name. One night, we were watching TV, and her phone lit up with a message. I wasn't even trying to snoop, but my eyes caught a name that sent a jolt through my chest. Jason. Jason was her ex-boyfriend. The one before me. The one she dated for years and claimed to have completely moved on from. The one she told me she was so glad she had left in the past. The one she insisted meant nothing to her anymore. I asked her about it casually, pretending I wasn't bothered. "Hey, I saw Jason's name pop up. You guys still talk?" Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She froze for a split second, just long enough for me to notice. Then she laughed, but it felt forced. "Oh, yeah, he messaged me a while back, just catching up. No big deal." No big deal. That I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in my gut told me that was a lie. And once that seed of doubt was planted, it started growing fast. The next few weeks were a slow spiral. Lisa became more secretive. She changed the password on her phone, something she had never done before. She started working late more often, coming home smelling like perfume, even though she claimed she had just been at the office. The nights she spent out with friends stretched later and later, until she wasn't coming home until well past midnight. And the worst part? She stopped caring. She used to at least pretend to feel guilty when she canceled plans or ignored my calls. Now, she barely made excuses. When I asked why she was coming home so late, she would just sigh and roll her eyes, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "I have a life outside of this house, you know," she snapped one night when I questioned her about it. That was the moment I knew something was really, really wrong. That I started paying attention. Not in a controlling way, just observing. I noticed how she would take phone calls in the other room, how she would leave the house wearing one outfit and come back in another, how she would say she was exhausted from work but still had the energy to go out 3 nights a week. The final straw came last week. She had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. I had never gone through her stuff before, but something about the way she had been acting made me snap. I clicked on her messages, and there he was. Jason. I scrolled up, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Their conversation wasn't just casual catching up. It wasn't even flirty banter. It was full-on, undeniable, in-your-face cheating. "I miss you. I wish we had more time together. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hand started shaking as I kept scrolling, each message worse than the last. They had been seeing each other for months. They had met up in hotels, in his apartment, in my house while I was at work. She had been lying straight to my face every single day, acting like I was crazy for even suspecting anything. That I shut the laptop, my mind racing. My stomach churned like I was going to be sick. The betrayal hit me all at once, a sharp, crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. That I had proof. Cold, undeniable proof. But now, the real question was, what was I going to do about it? Sitting in the dim light of the kitchen, staring at the laptop screen, my whole body felt numb. My eyes moved over the messages again and again, but my brain refused to fully process what I was seeing. It was like my mind was trying to protect me, creating a barrier between reality and the truth. But the truth was right there, written out in clear, undeniable words. Every late night, every secretive glance, every excuse that never quite made sense, it had all led to this. Months of deception laid bare in front of me in black and white. My wife had been sleeping with her ex, and she hadn't even tried to hide it well. Maybe she thought I would never check, or maybe she had convinced herself that I wouldn't dare question her. Either way, the proof was right in front of me, and the weight of it crushed down on me with full force. That I sat there for what felt like hours, my heart hammering against my ribs, my stomach twisting with a sickening churn. A part of me wanted to throw the laptop across the room, to destroy it so that I wouldn't have to see the evidence anymore. But another part of me, the logical part, knew that there was no escaping this. The damage was already done, and whether I wanted to face it or not, my marriage was already broken. I thought about every moment over the past few months, every time I had questioned my instincts and told myself I was overthinking. Every single time I had looked into her eyes and believed her lies. The late-night outings, the unexplained absences, the irritation in her voice whenever I asked about her whereabouts, all of it now made sense. She hadn't just been drifting away from me. She had already left. That I had to remind myself to breathe, to pull air into my lungs as the reality of my situation settled deep into my bones. There was no going back from this. Even if I confronted her and she begged for forgiveness, I knew I would never be able to look at her the same way again. The trust that had once been the foundation of our marriage had been shattered beyond repair. I thought about the years we had spent together, the memories we had built, and how easily she had thrown it all away for a man she had claimed to be nothing more than a part of her past. The betrayal burned deep, turning every happy memory into something bitter, something tainted by the knowledge that it had all been a lie. Anger started creeping in, slowly replacing the numbness. It wasn't just the affair that infuriated me. It was the way she had carried on with no remorse, the way she had treated me like I was nothing but a fool. Every time she had rolled her eyes at me, every time she had made me feel guilty for asking simple questions, every time she had walked through the door at 2 in the morning with a casual excuse, she had been treating me like a joke. Like I was too blind, too trusting, too weak to ever realize what she was doing behind my back. That I clenched my fists, my whole body tense with the weight of everything that had been building up inside me for months. The lies, the manipulation, the utter disrespect she had shown me, it all boiled to the surface, threatening to spill over in a way I wasn't sure I could control. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to be the man who sat in silence while his wife betrayed him over and over again. I had wasted enough time convincing myself that things were fine, that I was imagining things, that she would never do something like this. That version of me no longer existed. The sound of water shutting off from the bathroom pulled me back into the moment, reminding me that Lisa was still in the house, still oblivious to the fact that I knew everything. My muscles tensed as I heard her footsteps down the hall, my pulse pounding in my ears. I hadn't decided what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I closed the laptop, my hand steady now as I shut the screen and placed it back exactly where she had left it. There was no need to rush. I wasn't going to let her dictate how this played out. She had controlled the narrative for too long, weaving her web of lies while making me doubt my own instincts. But that was over. This was my reality now, and for the first time in months, I felt completely, painfully awake. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had built my life with, had made her choice. Now, it was time for me to make mine. The sound of Lisa moving through the house felt distant, like background noise in a film where I was suddenly no longer the main character. My body felt disconnected from my mind, like I was watching myself from the outside, observing a man who had just had his entire world upended and was trying to figure out what to do with the broken pieces. The realization that my wife had been living a double life settled deeper, like a weight pressing down on my chest. She had been in the next room, humming to herself as if nothing had happened, while I had been staring at the evidence of her betrayal. The contrast between the two versions of our lives, my reality and the illusion she had been feeding me, was almost unbearable. That I had always thought of myself as a rational person, someone who approached problems with a level head. But as I sat there, feeling my blood burn in my veins, I realized that rationality had been a weakness. I had given Lisa every opportunity to be honest, to come clean, to respect me enough to tell the truth. And what had she done? She had played me. She had lied to my face over and over again, testing the limits of how much she could get away with. It wasn't just the affair itself that disgusted me, it was the sheer lack of remorse, the arrogance of assuming I would never find out. As my mind replayed the moments leading up to this, I started to see things with brutal clarity. Every time she had accused me of being paranoid, she had already made her choice. Every time she had looked me in the eyes and told me she was just out with friends, she had already decided that my trust was disposable. Every time she had come home late, expecting me to be asleep, she had been hoping I was too much of a fool to notice the lipstick smudges that weren't mine, the scent of cologne that didn't belong in our house, the way she carried herself with the smug confidence of someone who thought they had me wrapped around their finger. That I could hear her moving around in the bedroom, probably texting Jason or scrolling through social media like everything was normal. The fact that she could act so casually, so comfortably, after everything she had done made my stomach twist with revulsion. I wondered what lies she had told him about me. Had she painted me as a bad husband? Had she told him that I didn't make her happy anymore? That she had fallen out of love with me, but was too scared to end it? Or worse, had she laughed about me with him, swapping stories about how gullible I was, how easy it had been to deceive me? I had never considered myself a vengeful person. But sitting there, feeling the weight of my wife's betrayal settle into my bones, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. This was about reclaiming my dignity, about refusing to be treated like a fool for another second. I had spent months doubting myself, questioning my own instincts, all because I had been too afraid to see the truth. But now, there was no denying it. And I wasn't going to just sit back and let her keep pretending. I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate, as if my body needed a moment to catch up with the decision my mind had already made. Every step toward the bedroom felt heavier, my heartbeat thudding in my ears like a drum announcing the moment that would change everything. I wasn't sure what I was going to say yet, but I knew there was no point in waiting. Lisa had built this false reality where she was untouchable, where she could do whatever she wanted and face no consequences. That was about to end. I reached the bedroom doorway and paused, staring at her as she sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone with a look of quiet contentment. She hadn't noticed me yet. I took in every detail: the way she was lounging in the very home she had desecrated, the casual ease with which she existed in the life she had secretly set on fire. My grip tightened at my sides as the anger inside me turned ice cold. Lisa finally looked up, her expression shifting slightly when she saw me standing there, but she didn't react like someone who had just been caught. She gave me that same tired, mildly irritated look she always did when she thought I was about to ask her something she didn't want to answer. I realized then just how much she had been treating me like an inconvenience, like an obstacle she had to navigate around while she lived her double life. It made me sick that I kept my voice steady as I spoke, but there was an edge to it that even I hadn't expected. I told her I knew. I told her I had seen the messages. I told her that every excuse, every lie, every manipulative little trick she had pulled was over. The words left my mouth like a blade cutting through the air, sharp and final. Lisa's expression changed in an instant. The moment the words registered, her face froze. It was only for a second, but I caught it, the flicker of panic, the brief widening of her eyes before she forced her features into something more controlled. That 1 second told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't surprised. She was caught. What followed was a blur of reactions, none of which included an ounce of genuine remorse. First came denial, rapid and defensive. She accused me of overreacting, of misinterpreting things, of being insecure. When she saw that wasn't working, she shifted into anger. How dare I go through her things? How dare I accuse her of something so disgusting? Then came the tears, forced, pitiful, an attempt to make herself the victim in a situation where she had been the one holding the knife. I didn't fall for any of it. Not this time. I watched her scramble to regain control of the situation, to rewrite the narrative like she always had. But it was useless. I wasn't the same man I had been yesterday. Something inside me had shattered beyond repair, and no amount of gaslighting, no amount of sweet words or desperate justifications, could piece it back together. As she sat there, watching me with wide eyes, waiting to see if she could still manipulate her way out of this, I realized something that changed everything. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about her excuses, about her justifications, about whatever sad little story she had crafted to make herself feel better about what she had done. I didn't care about what Jason had that I didn't. I didn't care about her reasons or her regrets. All I cared about was one simple truth: I was done. There was no saving this marriage. There was no fixing what she had broken. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. I turned on my heel without another word, walking out of the bedroom and leaving her sitting there, staring after me. The only thing I felt was relief. For the first time in months, I wasn't trapped in uncertainty. I wasn't questioning myself, wasn't wondering if I was imagining things, wasn't clinging to the hope that maybe I was wrong. I wasn't wrong. And now, I was free. Lisa could have Jason. I was taking back my life. The moment I walked out of that bedroom, I knew there was no turning back. The air in the house felt different, heavier, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of everything that had just been exposed. My mind felt sharp, yet detached, as if I was watching my own life unravel from the outside. I had always imagined that if I ever found myself in this situation, I would feel some kind of violent rage, an uncontrollable need to break something, to scream, to lash out. But there was none of that. Only the cold, unshakable certainty that everything was over. Lisa stayed in the bedroom for a while after I walked out. I could hear the faint rustling of movement, the occasional sniffle, the creak of the mattress as she shifted her weight. I had no idea what she was thinking, and for the first time in years, I didn't care. Maybe she was trying to come up with another excuse, another way to manipulate the situation so that she wouldn't have to face the consequences of her actions. Or maybe she was realizing, too late, that the game was up. I paced through the house, my thoughts moving too fast to grasp. I had spent months second-guessing myself, ignoring my instincts, convincing myself that she would never betray me like this. But now, all of those moments had stacked up, one on top of the other, forming an undeniable truth that I couldn't ignore. Lisa had checked out of our marriage long before I had discovered the truth. She had just been waiting for me to catch up. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not the wild, impulsive anger that burns hot and fades fast, but something deeper, something colder. It was the anger of wasted years, of broken trust, of realizing that the person you had given everything to had never valued you enough to be honest. The kind of anger that doesn't scream or break things but instead settles into your bones and stays there, changing you in ways you don't even fully understand. I had always assumed that if something like this ever happened, there would be some part of me that would want to fight for my marriage, that would want to hold on to the life we had built together. But standing there, in the silence of a house that no longer felt like home, I realized there was nothing left to fight for. Lisa had made her choice long before I had discovered the truth. She had chosen Jason, chosen secrecy, chosen deception. And now, I was choosing myself. Lisa finally emerged from the bedroom, her footsteps hesitant as she stepped into the hallway. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of her presence, the tension crackling in the air between us like an unspoken battle neither of us wanted to be the first to engage in. But I wasn't going to play her game. I had already won the moment I decided to walk away. She lingered for a moment, as if waiting for me to say something. But I had nothing left to say that I walked to the kitchen, grabbed my keys, and without looking back, I walked out the door. The night air hit me like a shock to the system, the cool breeze biting against my skin as I stepped into the driveway. The world outside carried on as if nothing had changed, as if my life hadn't just imploded in the most spectacular way possible. The distant hum of traffic, the faint flicker of streetlights, the rustling of trees in the wind, it all felt surreal, like I was walking through a scene in someone else's life. I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breath came in slow, measured inhales, each one forcing me to hold back the tidal wave of emotions that threatened to crash over me. I had no idea where I was going, I just knew I couldn't be there. Not with her. Not in that house that now felt like a monument to everything I had lost. I drove aimlessly through the city, the streets blurring together as my thoughts spiraled. Every memory I had of Lisa felt tainted now, every happy moment rewritten by the knowledge of what she had been doing behind my back. I thought about all the times I had told her I loved her, all the nights we had spent planning our future, all the little moments that had once felt so meaningful. And now, all of it felt like a lie. At some point, I pulled into the parking lot of a nearly empty gas station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow over the pavement. I sat there, staring blankly at the dashboard, my mind a mess of emotions I couldn't untangle. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was furious, humiliated, exhausted. How had I let this happen? How had I allowed myself to be so blind? And then, just as quickly as the anger had flared, exhaustion took its place. My whole body felt heavy, like I had been carrying something far too heavy for far too long, and now, suddenly, I had been forced to drop it. I leaned back against the seat, staring up at the ceiling, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I had been holding. This was it. The end. There was no going back, no fixing what had been broken. And maybe, just maybe, that was for the best. That I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't know where I would go or what I would do. But I knew one thing for certain, that I wasn't going to be the man who begged for answers from someone who had never cared enough to give them in the first place. Lisa had made her choice, now it was time for me to make mine. I sat in that parking lot for longer than I could keep track of. The hum of the gas station lights and the occasional whoosh of a passing car were the only things breaking the heavy silence pressing down on me. My mind felt like a storm that had passed, leaving only wreckage in its wake. There was no more disbelief, no more denial, no more second-guessing. Just the quiet, crushing weight of knowing that everything I had built with Lisa was gone. That I kept thinking about how it had happened, how she had been able to look me in the eye and pretend that nothing had changed while carrying on with Jason behind my back. The sheer disrespect of it all made my blood boil. Not just the cheating itself, but the way she had treated me, like I was disposable, like I wasn't worth the truth. Every time she had laughed off my concerns, every time she had brushed me aside with a quick excuse, she had been making a choice. Not just to betray me, but to treat me like a fool while doing it. The thing that got me the most was how comfortable she had been living her double life. She hadn't slipped up, hadn't confessed in a moment of guilt, hadn't even seemed to feel the weight of what she was doing. She had been completely fine lying to my face, coming home to our bed after being with him, and pretending that everything was normal. And that told me everything I needed to know about who she really was. I had been replaying all the moments where she had dismissed me, the way she would get irritated when I asked simple questions, the way she had started talking to me like I was a nuisance. At first, I had thought it was stress, maybe burnout from work. But now, looking back, I saw it for what it really was: contempt. She had already moved on in her mind, already convinced herself that she didn't need to respect me anymore because she had someone else waiting for her, and yet, she still hadn't left. That was the part that confused me the most. If she was so unhappy, if she wanted to be with Jason, why hadn't she ended things? The answer came to me with an almost painful clarity because she hadn't needed to. She had the best of both worlds. Stability with me, excitement with him. A husband who handled the responsibilities of life and a lover who provided the thrill. She had been perfectly happy keeping me in the dark, dragging this out for as long as she could. I clenched my jaw, gripping the steering wheel as I forced myself to breathe through the anger. There was no point in letting it consume me. Lisa had already taken so much from me, I wasn't going to let her take my sanity too. For the first time that night, I checked my phone. A few missed calls from Lisa. A couple of texts that didn't say much beyond, "Where are you?" and "Come home so we can talk." The fact that she wasn't bombarding me with messages or frantic apologies told me everything. She wasn't panicking, wasn't scrambling to fix this. She was waiting to see how I would react so she could figure out how to spin it. That was when I knew I couldn't go back. That I turned the key in the ignition, pulling out of the gas station with no real destination in mind. I needed to clear my head, to figure out my next move. The city was quiet at this hour, the streets nearly empty. I drove aimlessly, my mind running through every option, every possible way forward. I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't keep living in that house with her, pretending that things could ever go back to normal. The idea of packing my things and leaving felt strange, almost surreal. This was my home too, my life that I had built. Why should I be the one to leave? But the truth was, the house didn't feel like home anymore. Every room was tainted with her betrayal, every piece of furniture now just a reminder of what she had destroyed. Staying there would only make it harder to move on, and that was the only thing left to do: move on. There was nothing to salvage here. No conversation, no apology, no explanation could undo what she had done. Even if she begged, even if she swore she had made a mistake, I knew deep down that I could never trust her again. The damage was too deep, the betrayal too sharp. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there, staring out at the dark sky. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't rest. I kept thinking about how things had started, how much I had loved Lisa, how I had never imagined we would end up like this. I had built my life around her, trusted her with everything, and she had treated that trust like it was nothing. But as much as it hurt, I knew this was a turning point. There was no use dwelling on what I had lost. The only thing that mattered now was what I did next. That I picked up my phone and started looking at apartments. Lisa had already taken enough from me that I wasn't going to let her take my future too. The more I stared at the empty parking lot, the more I realized there was no avoiding what had to happen next. I had spent too long living in the lie Lisa had crafted, playing the role of the oblivious husband while she laughed behind my back. That was over. I wasn't going to be the guy who stuck around, who let her string me along while she figured out whether she wanted to keep her marriage or continue sneaking off with Jason. I wasn't an option. I wasn't a safety net. I was done. The thought of leaving was still strange, though. I had spent years building that home, filling it with memories, believing that it was where I would grow old with Lisa. And now, in the span of a few hours, I was looking at it like an abandoned place I needed to escape from. But that's what it had become. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a house where my wife had betrayed me, a house that now felt foreign, like I had been living with a stranger this entire time. That I knew I couldn't just drive around forever, avoiding the inevitable. At some point, I would have to go back, if only to grab what I needed and figure out where to go next. I opened my phone again and scrolled through the rental listings. The thought of getting my own place, of starting over, felt overwhelming. But at the same time, it felt like freedom. No more coming home to suspicion and doubt. No more checking my watch when Lisa wasn't home, wondering where she really was. No more feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. There were a few listings that looked decent, nothing fancy, but enough to be a start. I didn't need much, just a place that was mine, a space where I could breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I saved a couple of numbers to call in the morning, then put my phone down and leaned back against the headrest. My body ached with exhaustion, but my mind was still racing that I didn't want to go back, but I knew I had to. I drove slowly, taking the long way back, trying to prepare myself for whatever scene I was about to walk into. Would Lisa be waiting up for me, ready to beg and plead? Or would she act like nothing had happened, as if this was just a minor argument that we could brush under the rug? I didn't know which version of her would be there when I walked through that door, but either way, it wouldn't change my decision. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for a single light in the living room. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel as I gathered myself. This was at the moment where I truly took my first step away from Lisa and everything we had built together. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me as quietly as I could. Lisa was sitting on the couch, her phone in her hands, her expression unreadable. She looked up as I entered, but she didn't speak right away. There was no frantic rush of apologies, no dramatic breakdown. Just silence. I walked past her without a word and headed straight to the bedroom. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Clothes, toiletries, a few important documents, enough to get me through the next few days while I figured out my next move. Every movement felt mechanical, like I was on autopilot, shutting down the part of me that still wanted answers. Lisa finally appeared in the doorway, watching me. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. She asked if I was really leaving, as if she hadn't expected me to follow through. As if she still thought she had control over the situation. I didn't look at her as I told her yes. She didn't fight me on it. Maybe she knew it was pointless, or maybe she had already made peace with the fact that this was the end. Either way, she didn't try to stop me. I zipped up my bag and slung it over my shoulder. When I turned to leave, Lisa finally spoke again. Her voice was softer now, almost sad. She said she never meant for it to happen this way. That she never wanted to hurt me. That she didn't know how things had gotten so out of control. I didn't respond. I walked past her, past the life we had built, past the woman I had once loved, and out the door. I didn't look back. I tossed my bag into the car and drove away without a destination, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was heading somewhere that actually mattered. Somewhere that didn't include lies, betrayal, and a wife who had already chosen someone else before I even knew there was a choice to be made. The road stretched out ahead of me, and for the first time, I let myself think about what was next. Not what had been lost, not what had been broken, but what I could build for myself now that I was free. Lisa had made her decision. Now, I was making mine, and this time, it was for me. The night stretched out in front of me as I drove aimlessly through the city, my duffel bag sitting in the passenger seat like a reminder that I had truly done it. I had left the house, the life, the woman I had built everything around. All of it was now behind me, growing smaller with every mile. I should have felt some kind of relief, maybe even triumph, but all I felt was exhaustion. The kind that settles deep in your bones, making you question if you'll ever fully recover. I had no destination, no plan beyond getting as far away from Lisa as I could stomach. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel as flashes of the last few months replayed in my mind. The late nights, the unanswered questions, the way she had looked at me with growing irritation every time I pressed her for the truth. It had all led to this moment, and yet, it still felt surreal. I had spent years believing we were partners, that no matter what, we would face things together. But I had been alone in that belief, and now, I was truly alone. The empty streets felt like a mirror of my own life, silent, stretched out, waiting for something to happen next. I pulled into an all-night diner, the kind of place that hadn't changed since the 80s, with flickering neon lights and the scent of burnt coffee hanging in the air. I slid into a booth in the corner, ordered something I wouldn't eat, and stared out the window at the city that kept moving, indifferent to my world collapsing around me. Lisa still hadn't called again. No more texts, no desperate pleas, no attempts to fix what couldn't be fixed. She was probably sitting in our house, trying to decide how to spin this in her favor, how to make herself the victim in a story where she had been the villain all along. Maybe she was already reaching out to Jason, setting up her next move now that I was gone. The thought of them together no longer filled me with rage, it just felt like confirmation of everything I had already known, that I wondered how long she had been waiting for me to find out. Had she been hoping I'd never know, that she could keep living her double life without consequences? Or had she been hoping I would be the one to end it, so she wouldn't have to? Either way, it didn't matter anymore. The moment I walked out that door, I had given her what she wanted: freedom. But what she didn't realize was that I had given myself something even more valuable, that I wasn't staying stuck in her mess any longer. By the time the sun started creeping up over the horizon, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to let Lisa's betrayal define me. I wasn't going to let it turn me into someone bitter, someone who spent years carrying the weight of what she had done. She had taken enough from me. I wasn't going to give her the rest of my life. I picked up my phone and made the first real move toward my future. I booked an extended stay hotel for the next few weeks, just enough time to find a real place. I called my boss and took some time off work. Then, I did something I should have done the moment I found out the truth. I blocked Lisa's number. She had lost the right to have access to me. The next few days were a blur of packing up my life, moving into the hotel, and trying to process everything that had happened. I had expected Lisa to show up, to beg, to demand an explanation, but she didn't. Maybe she knew it was pointless, or maybe she was too busy with Jason to care. Either way, it made things easier. The hardest part was telling the people in my life what had happened. My friends, my family, they had all seen us as the perfect couple. I could hear the shock in their voices when I told them the truth, the way their words stumbled as they tried to find the right thing to say. But the more I talked about it, the lighter I felt. Saying it out loud, admitting that Lisa had betrayed me, made it real. It made it something I could deal with instead of something that controlled me, and slowly, the anger started to fade, not because what she did was forgivable, it wasn't. But because I was finally realizing that I didn't need to carry it anymore. Lisa's choices were hers, and they had nothing to do with my worth. She hadn't cheated because I wasn't enough. She had cheated because she was selfish, because she cared more about her own desires than the damage she was doing. That was her burden to bear, not mine. A week after I walked out, I found my own apartment. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom in a quiet part of the city, smaller than the house I had shared with Lisa, but it felt like a fresh start. The first night there, I sat on the floor with a six-pack of beer, staring at the bare walls and letting the silence settle around me. For the first time in months, it was a silence I could live with. Lisa was gone from my life, and I was still standing. I didn't need her to explain why she had done it. I didn't need her apologies, her excuses, or her justifications. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. The only difference was that my choice was finally for me. Looking back, I realized that Lisa's betrayal had been the worst thing that had ever happened to me, but it had also been the best. It had forced me to see the truth, to stop living in denial, to finally take control of my own life. I had spent years loving someone who didn't deserve it. Now, it was time to figure out what it meant to love myself instead. The past was done, the future was mine.